Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Nadelka, your Realtor Mom, and welcome back to my podcast. Today, we're talking about something that's so important but rarely explained simply: how to build real wealth through real estate. And I brought the perfect person to break it down. Madison Avolio from Synergy One Lending is here with us today. So, welcome, Madison.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So, she's not just a lender, she's a money strategist who helps her clients think of the big picture from buying their first home to growing wealth through property. So Madison and I met not that long ago, but we've had the opportunity to work together, and I'm super excited because I know that we're going to end up doing a lot of deals together, helping our clients mutually build some real wealth through real estate. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and what your goal is as a lender?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background actually is in accounting. I did both my undergrad and my master's. I was going to go become an accountant, hence my, huge push for wealth as well as just overall financial building and resources. I ended up in the world of mortgages because a friend of mine his organization was struggling, and I was like, I can come in here and fix this. I'm going to solve this puzzle and I'm going to fix this. And I just never left. I really found that helping people strategize and helping in the background especially was one of my specialties. Sort of solving the puzzle and helping people end up in the house of their dreams, or even the investment properties that they wanted to purchase, really building their portfolio. And then I kind of got tired of being the person that works behind the scenes, and I moved into the spotlight, and I've been writing loans and helping people acquire properties and, budget the home of their dreams for a couple of years now.
Awesome. I feel like Madison makes talking about money a lot less intimidating and helps buyers kind of feel more at ease with the process. So, Madison, a lot of people see buying homes as just a place to live. Why do you see buying a home as the first step to building your wealth?
I think that there can be a lot of confusion about the difference between having money and gaining wealth. Having money and having it sit in your bank account, while it's wonderful and it makes you feel at ease, doesn't mean that your money is working for you. That's where the aspect of wealth comes in. So yeah, you can pay a landlord rent, but you're not actually gaining wealth in that asset, that house. So purchasing a home, while it seems incredibly daunting and, the payments are there, as you're making each payment, you're actually eating into the principal balance of the loan, and you're gaining that wealth, you're gaining that asset. Just because you can't touch it and you can't see it in your bank account doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And at the same time, the house is also increasing in value. So it's kind of like saving for a 401k. It comes directly out of your paycheck and you act like that money doesn't exist. It's really similar when it comes to a house, and you gain wealth that way, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize because it's not tangible.
Right. And it's also, when you bring up renting, it's paying your mortgage versus somebody else's. So you always have a payment if you're renting. And at some point, as you're building your wealth in your home, that payment's going to go away.
Yes.
Or you upsize, or, at some point you go through the cycle. You buy your first home, you might upsize a little bit, and then eventually you're going to downsize again, potentially. Yes. And at some point, it's all going to be paid off, and now you have real wealth. So what do you think some of the biggest financial mistakes that first-time homebuyers make?
I think that there's a lot of peer pressure on social media, and people think that the first home that they have has to be the one that everybody sees and the one that you're going to live in for 30 years. You don't have to start your home buying experience with a $400,000 home.
Right.
I started mine with one that was $150,000, and then I moved on to a bigger one thereafter. And I utilized the wealth that I built in that first home to move into something that fit more for my family later down the line. I had another child. I had brought in a few more cats and I needed to expand. I wanted a garden, so I moved on to my second home. The first home that you buy is wholly unlikely going to be the one that you end up retiring in, and even then possibly downsizing later after maybe your family's downsized. So the biggest faux pas I see people make is honestly not entering the market because they can't hit the same goals that they see on social media.
Right. For sure. For sure. I know that my house we've been in now, it's not my first house, but the one that we've been in now, we're pushing 20 years, is almost doubled in value. So I could have been paying rent all along, but now I have taken the money that I invested and it's almost worth double what it was. So that really is where we build our wealth in real estate. So what do you think that one thing that somebody looking into buying a home and entering the market, what is one thing that they can do today to start preparing financially for when they're ready to buy their home?
Budget. And when I say budget, I don't mean just track your spending. Absolutely track your spending. But at the same time, do what's called a zero-sum budget. So you take everything that you make, you budget out your needs, you budget out your wants. If there's debt that you need to pay, whether it's a credit card bill or a car payment, you factor that in as well. Then let's try and factor in savings. So you're hitting a $0 a month like overflow basically, but if there does end up being any overflow, it's additional towards savings. My budget, I always calculate at least $1,200 a month for savings, and I utilize that as my zero sum. In doing that, not only are you increasing, your bank account numbers, it helps you save for a down payment. It helps you make sure that you're going to be able to afford that house. And, even with rates where they are, I always say that like, if you can afford it now, you can afford it later. So making sure that you're factoring in just the overall payment, you're getting your down payment, you're getting sinking funds in place, whether that could be, I want to save $5,000 over the course of 12 months for possible house maintenance, or I want to save $600 because I know that Christmas comes around every year, or my daughter's birthday, or hey, I'd like to save for a vacation. Those savings really come into play, but just a budget, tracking your spending, making sure you're not eating out all the time, making sure you're intentional about when you are eating out. It's really just tracking your spending.
I love, and I'm going to take this off a little bit, I love that you said you save about $1,200 a month. Clearly her child is younger, because I have a teenage, she's an adult now, and $1,200 with a teenager. I'm impressed that you can do that now, because that might not happen in another 10 years.
We just finished paying daycare, which was $1,500 a month. So I'm happy that bill's gone. And I'm also sitting here budgeting off of just my fiance's income as well. Mine is very variable, so I don't want to have to count on it. Anywhere that we can, I just want to count on his stable salary.
Awesome. That's awesome. So an important thing is, when you are looking to buy a house, it really isn't just about buying a house. It's about building for your future. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that with real estate and in building your wealth, it isn't just the now, it's what's coming down the road. And she has a young daughter, and she's building her wealth now. She's upsized her house, and she's still saving money, $1,200 a month, to build for her next house in the wealth that she's going to build, or her investment property. As we know, we've dabbled into that a little bit here. So I definitely think you're one of those experts that really contributes to the people's knowledge of building that wealth.
Well, and I would like to add too, even if it's not $1,200 a month, if it's 50, right, 100, 150, it doesn't matter how much it is, as long as you're factoring that in and really making sure that you're hitting those targets. That's what matters. We want to make sure that we're not living paycheck to paycheck, but we're putting something aside, whether it's for an emergency or a down payment or just an expense that is coming, like buying Christmas presents.
Right. And if you find yourself at a point where you feel like you do live paycheck to paycheck, the budget that you said makes you look at what you're spending. Mm-hmm. Do you need a $10 cup of Starbucks every day, or whatever it is? You add that up, that's $70 in a week if you get one every day. So those kind of things are when you're looking to budget and save. Really budget and see, what are you spending your money on? Mm-hmm. What's a need? What are you willing to sacrifice so you can build your wealth for the future?
And it's one of the things that they really don't teach. My parents were accountants, and this is never something that we discussed. I went to school for accounting. This is never something that was taught. The only reason I started doing this is because during, when the rates increased significantly, not only did I lose a relationship at that time, so I was no longer on a dual income, but also my income cut back significantly. And I found that I didn't know where I was spending things. I needed to reel in my spending, and I felt like I was suffering the anxiety that I had. So I taught myself how to budget. I looked and saw where I was actually, overspending. Could I spend $500 to put a TV in my bedroom? Not really. You know what I mean? Like, I
Right.
had to be really intentional and really focused. My grocery budget was wild in comparison to what I needed it to be. So I set myself a challenge. Can I do this for $50 a week for my daughter and I at the time? And it was like, I'm a very competitive person. So I set myself those challenges and I was able to reach them. But now, being a person that I budget now as somebody who never did before, and I see people who are younger who don't know how to budget, they don't know where to start. That's really something that I push with my clients to make sure that we're setting them up for success, that they're not going overboard, that they really can't afford it. Because even when we qualify people for a mortgage, there are things that we don't take into consideration. We look at what's being reported on your credit and how much income you're bringing in, even before taxes, before 401k deductions and everything. So, things that don't get reported on your credit, like a car insurance payment or your cell phone bill, and we're looking at income before you pay taxes. So I really try to make sure that it's within my client's budget to actually be able to afford that home. And we have conversations about, hey, I know that it's $1,500 a month and it's showing that it's 40% of the expenses that I can see versus your gross income. But what about the expenses I can't see? Because I'll have people say, hey, can you push this a little bit more? Can we buy a little bit more? And I'll be like, is it really the way that we want to go? Because technically, yes, I can, but is that putting you in the best situation?
Right. And that's a good point. A lot of times I have buyers that come to me with a pre-approval and they might be pre-approved for this
Maxed
out number. And then when you break down and say, okay, well, here's the payment on that house, they're like, oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, considering all your expenses definitely plays a big impact on what you can truly afford. And again, you could be, if you're willing to make cuts to tighten your budget to get that bigger house, then great. But know that payment's not going to go away until you pay off your mortgage.
Yep.
So, all right, I want to shift a little bit and move into talking more about buying to investing, because I've heard you talk about turning your first home into an investment. So what does that actually look like for someone who's new to real estate and investing?
So let's say you purchased that first home. Mine was, $150,000. It's a smaller mortgage payment. Obviously, I did that on purpose. Now I want to go and purchase another home. I want to purchase a bigger home for the expansion of my family. I can keep that first house and I can rent it out to people. Obviously, I had to come with, the down payment, make sure I can afford the down payment on the new home, but I can rent out that first house. If that first house is a $1,200 a month mortgage payment and I can rent it out for $1,500, I'm now in the positive by about $300 a month. There's other things to factor in, like, how much are you going to save for house maintenance? Are you going to have a property manager? Or are you going to do it yourself? Right. But having the ability to start building wealth through real estate by buying your first home, making it that smaller consideration to know that you're going to move on to a different one. The other thing that I actually coach a lot of my buyers to, and one thing that I wish that I did with my first house, buy a duplex. Buy a triplex, buy a 4-unit, because you're still going to be able to rent out that house after you leave. And somebody else is making your mortgage payment while you live there. So now you can take that mortgage payment that you were going to make or the additional rental income that you are getting, save it for the next house, the bigger house.
Yeah, so that was kind of what I was going to ask you next is what kind of properties or loans work best for someone who's thinking about investing? So obviously you mentioned a multifamily. So yes, if you're, someone that's willing to live in a multifamily unit, that's clearly one of the best ways to start.
And that's really too where like that social media peer pressure comes into play. I didn't want to do that when I was younger because I was like, I want my own space. Like I didn't see the benefit of it in the way that it really is a benefit, because I wanted to be like everybody else where I had my own space. I felt like it, and I was 22 when I bought my first house. So I felt like it was embarrassing that I had to, live with somebody else on my other side. Now that I'm 27, I'm like, I wish that I had done that. I wish that I'd started my rental portfolio then. I wish I had somebody else paying my mortgage payment for me. I would have been able to save so much more money, invest it, buy additional properties, move on to my new house sooner. I wish that I had done that. And I counsel all of my clients too, especially my first time home buyers, because sometimes they're a little bit shy about the payment. I'll be like, hey, what about a duplex instead? What about a 3-unit, a 4-unit? Like, let's look at those things so that somebody else can pay your mortgage for you, you can save, and then you can buy that other house later down the line.
Right. I kind of have to laugh a little bit because you said you were embarrassed at 22 for buying your first home, whereas most 22-year-olds realistically are probably renting. But I think that's a good point to make, is that at 22, you can buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying rent, and rents these days have gone through the
Astronomical.
roof, and you're literally saving nothing. So like, even if somebody buys something small, a duplex, whatever, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Like,
Exactly.
22 to have a house and know that you can have something that you own.
Yep.
You've got tax write-offs for different things that people don't consider. It really is about just getting out there and getting that first property so you can build wealth. Even if you don't want to be an investor and have rentals.
Yeah.
It's still building your wealth because you have something that's going to continue to grow in value, and it's more likely to grow faster than stocks.
Yes.
Because real estate's stable. I mean, everybody needs somewhere to live, right? So, stocks go up and down, investments go up and down. Not that they're not good, but real estate is really where the wealth is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're right. Everybody needs a place to live. Everybody is always either going to have to rent or they're going to have to buy. You're always going to see some level of appreciation. I think the only time that we didn't, now correct me if I'm wrong, because it was 2008, 2009, which was a little before my real estate records. I think I was still in like middle school.
She makes me feel so old. I do have kids older than you. That's what's crazy, but that's okay. But that's why you're here, because you have done it and your knowledge behind it is amazing.
And even in 2008, 2009, we saw a slight dip for a little bit, but overall it rebounded. It rebounded significantly. Our home values, to an unfortunate edge, are significantly higher than they were even after that collapse. And really, for real estate, it's the same thing for stocks. It's not timing the market, it's time in the market.
Right, exactly. And really, it's one of the questions that we get asked in real estate a lot. Like, when things started shifting with the country and everything, everyone's like, oh, well, home prices are going to drop. 2008 was definitely a different scenario.
Absolutely.
There was more, that was the predatory lending, and there's reasons that people failed. And our system has kind of corrected itself to not allow for that to happen again. So purchasing real estate now, I think we're safe that we've kind of lived through that mistake in the market.
There's so many like procedures in place to make sure things like that don't happen.
Right.
I mean, even through COVID with the idea of forbearances,
right,
that was something that had never happened before. So we came out with a program to help homeowners and really make sure that they could stay within the home that we were trying to get people to purchase for the wealth aspect of it. It was a whole new program, and it really saved a lot of people during COVID.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have a story, a client that maybe started small and built wealth that you could share, where they actually, through real estate, they started small? Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've worked with tons of investors. So somebody who ended up building their wealth through that small purchase at first, and that they've grown. Do you have a...
So I haven't worked with them like from the start. I know somebody who's been investing in the Cleveland area for about 20 years, and he came to me recently, and he's been having some more cash flow issues. Unfortunately, it was, 2018. Home values were super cheap in the Cleveland area in particular. So he bought some properties for 20 grand, 60 grand. Fantastic for him. But he went into a situation where he took out mortgages that were interest only from a private money lender. Now, the reason that I bring this up, I mean, he was able to amass 24 properties. He's moved on to 10 plus unit apartment complexes. However, he's made some shortfalls in his own personal situation. Love this guy to death. Absolutely. He's one of my favorite clients, but this is where his wealth has really worked for him. We're now going through and refinancing every single one of his properties, getting him out of those interest only mortgages so that he can actually start paying principal and really truly own his own property. He's taking the money out. He's fixing his own financial situation. He's also taking the additional funds, because it's 24 properties. He's taking the additional funds and going and purchasing more. And he's increasing his wealth. He's using his money and making it work for him.
Right. And I know you mentioned private money lenders, and I think that's probably, It works for some,
It does.
but for a new investor,
Don't do it.
I feel like the cost of it is way more expensive. Yes, they might be able to give it to you now, but I know a lot of people who getting started used a private money lender and they're just struggling and feeling like I have to sell everything because I got myself in a jam.
Yes.
Whereas if you go about it and you do it the right way through a reputable lender that is going to make sure that you're qualified and you're purchasing the right amount. Because, is it hard to find a good $20,000 house? It is. But there are some good properties out there that are a little bit more that they can go through traditional lending of, an investment lender that's legitimate, that isn't going to have outrageous terms and fees and payback. And private money lenders are something very different. And as somebody getting started in investments, I don't recommend it. And I know Madison probably says steer clear.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I hate to say it, but it does depend on like what they're trying to do. Fix and flip wise, like if that was where they wanted to start, which I would not recommend starting on the fix and flip. But if say you're really feeling like, let's go for it, let's take the risk for the reward, that's a situation where I would approach a private money lender. Fix and flip, like overall lenders can be good, but their fees tend to be a little bit higher. I have a private money lender that I actually work with, and he's somebody that I very much recommend, but he has systems in place to protect the investor. He only lends to, 70% of what the repair value is going to be. And he makes sure that he connects them with people who can do the end financing 12 months later.
That's awesome.
So it really depends on the lender. But yeah, for somebody who's first starting, I definitely recommend reaching out to someone like myself, someone who's more like, I have the background in the traditional lending space. I myself am also an investor and can sort of give like a risk reward analysis return. I do kind of a consulting call when I talk to an investor for the first time, just in general. I recommend reaching out to somebody like that to make sure that you're hitting the nail on the head. You're getting systems put in place. I've made a lot of faux pas. I've made a lot of mistakes when it came to my own rentals. And that's, I like to sort of caution the people that I talk to make sure that we're setting them up for the right situation. I went through a property manager. I had to put in massive repairs in a property because of a bad tenant. I have 2 properties. I run one myself. I run the other through a property manager. And I found a wonderful property manager after dealing with a horrible property manager. I was actually just on the phone with somebody who bought a 4-unit, and he bought it about a year ago. And he was looking at possibly refinancing it. And after, us quoting him out, he was like, well, I'm thinking about selling. And I'm like,
wow,
what's going on? Like, it's been a year. We have not gotten the return for this to make sense. Also, it's a 4-unit. Like, your revenue's $4,000 a month and your mortgage payment's like $2,000. So something's going on here.
Right.
He's like, well, I can't get 2 of the 4 units rented, and I've had to put in money for repairs, and I'm having issues with tenants. And I was like, well, he lives in Massachusetts. He invested here in Cleveland. I'm like, what's your property manager doing for you? He's like, I'm not happy with it. And I was like, okay, well, would you like my property manager? Because he's somebody that I trust. He actually stepped in on my own property before he officially had the contract. And that really won over my heart. So I connected this investor with my property manager, and I said, hey, let's, work on getting these 2 tenants in place for you. Decide if you like it, and then we'll jump back in 3 months and we'll look at refinancing you, because right now it doesn't make sense.
Gotcha. That's something that an investor, having somebody supporting them like you, is definitely helpful. I wasn't planning on hitting on this, but you mentioned it. So I want to you said you don't recommend doing a fix and flip first. And I've always in my head thought, well, I would do a fix and flip. Like if I were to get into investing, I was thinking I would do a fix and flip first, because I can put the money in that I have, do the repairs, and then sell it for a profit. So then I have a little bit more to go on to the next. So you suggest doing a rental first. So I kind of want to get your take on that and how you feel that's the better move, because I never thought that.
So, I mean, and this depends on the different strategies between two different people.
Sure.
I caution myself as more of a risk averse person. And I mention that to investors whenever I'm on that initial consulting call. Take my advice with a grain of salt. I am more risk averse than your probably traditional investor. I don't recommend fix and flips first because getting an understanding of the market is super important. You have an understanding of the market. You're an agent. You have the resources at your disposal to determine what the after repair value is going to be. You also walk properties consistently to see this is what sells. This is about how much that would cost to fix. But for somebody like myself, and I still walk properties and I still have a general understanding of what the market could be, I would want that in-depth understanding of like, one, what are buyers looking for a lot more in a fix and flip situation, but two, I want to understand the market. So I want my time in the market before I'm timing the market. And having an understanding and gaining that cash flow from actually owning the properties and then possibly moving on to a fix and flip situation, I think is better just so people can test the water without as much risk.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So one thing that I'm going to give the plug for the realtors on is a lot of investors, they flop.
Mm-hmm.
They bounce from realtor to realtor to realtor, and they're not building that relationship.
Yeah.
So as an investor, if you build a relationship with a realtor and don't flip from whatever realtor is going to run for you that day, and you build that relationship, you'll then have the resource to make those decisions long-term and potentially do a fix and flip. My best investor clients are those that consistently use me because I now know what they're looking for. Yep. And they know that they can trust that I'm going to give them a good ARV. Mm-hmm. And, I think buy and holds are great, obviously. It was a different perspective. So it's interesting to hear that, there are different ways to go about investing.
Yes.
And you're right. If you less risk, obviously a multifamily, a rental, whatever the case may be, that is a less risky, knowing that you can pay your mortgage with your income.
And something else I want to mention about fix and flips too, they're wonderful and they get you the cash, but if you're focusing on building that wealth too, holding properties is important. So even going from like, hey, let's do a fix and flip first, let's get the cash to then build the wealth, absolutely. For myself, it was, hey, let me buy these rental properties. I'm getting the rental income. I'm appreciating in value. I can now take the cash out of those properties, right, utilize that for my repair money, and then make the money on the fix and flip. And then something that people don't take into consideration with fix and flips too sometimes is like the capital gains tax,
right?
Which is where my accounting brain comes into play.
Sure.
So making sure that you're factoring things in like that too when you're doing fix and flips. Not only real estate commission, the closing costs that you're going to have when you sell it, the closing costs you're going to have when you buy it, your holding costs for if you're taking out a loan to even get the property in the first place, the property taxes you're going to pay monthly, the insurance you're going to pay monthly, and then at the end, your capital gains tax.
Right. So, and that's another thing. Not only is there capital gains tax, that's when you've sold it and made a profit in less than 2 years for those that don't know. But there's also things with a quick fix and flip with regards to financing for the buyer that might buy it. Yeah. You can't FHA loan. So you have a first time home buyer, and assuming you're not fixing and flipping $1 million properties, we're in Cleveland market. And, a lot of those properties that are fix and flips are more desirable to a first-time home buyer because they can get a very nice house at a reasonable cost. But if their loan is FHA and we're not in the right window, I want to say it's like
it's 90 days. 90 days. You can't buy a home that has been recently sold within the last 90 days as an FHA buyer. You simply cannot do it. Right. 91 to 180 days. If you're within that window, you can buy it, but there's a possibility of needing a second appraisal. Okay. As the buyer, you are not legally allowed to pay for the second appraisal. Right. So sometimes the lender will pay for it. Sometimes the agents will pay for it. Sometimes the seller will pay for it. I push for the seller to pay for it. But this is also something that if I have a buyer that comes to me and they're like, I want this property for an FHA, I look up the property first. If I see that it's within that 91 to 180 day window, I immediately call the agent and let them know what's going on. And it's nothing against agents, but we don't run into this often. We're running into it a lot more. So that is a knowledge point that I make sure that I give that buyer's agent, because there's a lot of agents that simply don't know.
Yeah, a lot of new agents might not know.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've run into it several times and I knew about the second appraisal, but when I first started, I was like, what do you mean? We already appraised. Like,
Yeah.
why? So it is something to consider, but, they're all things that you can work through with the right team in place for you as you're purchasing a home. So kind of flip to we're getting down to the end here. So if you could give buyers one piece of tough love, I like to ask every guest, in your industry, in your experience, what's one piece of tough love financial advice that you would give to a buyer?
Buy now. Everybody's always like, well, when's the best time to buy? Now. Technically, it was yesterday. Technically, it was like 2008, 2009. Realistically, buy now. If you can afford it now, you're going to be able to afford it later. If you want to stay in the house, we can always refinance you to a lower rate. There's no point in sitting there and paying somebody else's mortgage through rent when you can actually afford it yourself now. Now, that said, don't spend all of the money that you have either. Just because you have 10,000 sitting in your account doesn't mean that you need to put all of that 10,000 down. Do something a little bit less, make sure you have a cushion, make sure you have reserves, but look into buying now.
Right. I agree with that. It's probably one of the biggest things when somebody comes to me and says, they want to buy a house, but they can't do it right now. I'm like, have you talked to a lender? Because you might think that you can't do it because the thought of, oh my God, I'm going to buy a house is scary for people. And the reality is you probably can do it now. You might not go big and grand like we talked about earlier, but even if you buy $150,000 house and it's not in where you ultimately want to be, you're in a safe area, the things line up. It might not be your forever house, but it's still better than renting and paying somebody else's mortgage.
Absolutely. I mean, you can sometimes those properties too, they're undervalued because they haven't had like the flip aspect of it. They could still have pink tile in the bathroom.
Right.
But what's fun is to actually go through and fix things up yourself.
Yeah.
It's fun to put your personal touch on there. It's fun to color drench things. Like just go through, do it, and do some of the things yourself. You can learn about your house on the way. You can learn about how to do these projects on the way, and you have fun at the same time making a space yours.
Right. Absolutely. So, what is one money myth that people think is true and you wish they would just stop believing it? When it comes to money, what's one thing that you feel like there's a wrong perception of?
So specifically when it comes to mortgages, that putting more down is better. When you put 20% down, you actually get a worse interest rate than if you put 15% down on a conventional loan in particular. So there's the thing called private mortgage insurance on a conventional loan. That's where another company is basically insuring to the mortgage company that if for whatever reason, if there's a foreclosure or something, they're going to get paid back. You pay for that in a monthly, or you can actually pay for it up front. If you have a decent credit score, you can pay for it up front and it's going to be less than your monthly overall. But when it comes to the rates, because there's that little bit of protection, because your PMI drops off at 80%, you can call your lender and be like, hey, I'm done with this. But because there's that 5% coverage, you can actually get a better rate at an 85% loan to value ratio. So putting 15% down, paying a little bit in that mortgage insurance, but overall, 5% of your mortgage balance later, you're now dropping that and you have the better rate. Now you don't have to refi. You don't have to pay the title cost. You don't have to pay the recording cost. You don't have to get another appraisal. Don't put 20% down. 10% down, 5% down, 15% down. When you hit the 20, you're going to hit a worse rate.
Wow, that's interesting. And that is good to know. And that's something that most people probably don't know.
Yeah.
And
most lenders don't know that.
That's really interesting. And so these are the reasons that I always tell people, talk to a lender, find out. Even if the answer is no, you can't do it right now. At least you've opened the door and started having the conversation to build the knowledge yourself, to know what you're striving to save. And you might be thinking it's 20% when really it's not, because you can do 3%. You can do 5%. I've seen it happen in so many different ways. And
there's also no difference. So everything goes in like 5% increments. There's no point in putting 7% down. Put 5% and save your 2.
Right.
The other thing that you keep hitting on too is like, even if now, like specifically now isn't the right time, having that conversation is super important. It could be 6, 9, 12 months. It could be 2 years I will continuously follow up with you. I have somebody who they actually went through a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and so they can't actually purchase a home until next December. But we're putting a budget in place. We're having those conversations. I check in with them once a month to make sure everything's good to go. And she did her due diligence. I actually found her on Reddit, of all places.
Wow.
I was trolling the first time home buyer section, and she's like, I went through a bankruptcy. Can I qualify for anything? And I was like, hey, give me a call. So we got on the phone, we had our conversation. I did a softball on her credit, and now she has a path forward,
Right.
which wouldn't have happened had we not had that conversation.
I definitely think that's one of the biggest things is the conversation gives you that path forward. That's a perfect way to say it, because it gives you, I had a client that wasn't ready and knew that they're working on getting through a certain period of time with their kids in school.
Yeah.
And they were looking to, in January, considering to start the process. And I said, you know what, it's best if you talk to a lender now.
Exactly.
Because that way you know where you're at and what you need to do. And thank goodness that he did reach out to a lender, because he was going to change how he filed his business.
Goodness.
He's a business owner.
Yep.
And he was going to go from a 1099 to a W-2. And that would have stopped his process in January with the way that the taxes would have fallen, because your income, everything with your income. So there was a reason to not do it. And so the point is reaching out to the lender, even though you weren't ready right now, having that conversation was like, oh, thank goodness I didn't do that, because I would have been in a different situation and we might have been on hold a little bit longer.
And I think people wait to have those conversations because they're, especially when it comes to like credit stuff, they're like embarrassed. I promise you, like if you have a bankruptcy, if you've missed some payments, honestly, we don't care.
Right.
We've seen it all. An under 600 credit score, we don't care. You could be at a 500 for all it matters. If you want to buy, and there's, I hate to say it, but like a puzzle to solve, if it's really something that's in your cards right now and you feel ready, we can work on doing it. We can game plan it. It could be 12 months, but like, we don't care. It's not embarrassing to us. Honestly, if you talk to almost anybody in this industry, somebody's had something on their credit. There's a guy who mentored me for the first part of my career, and he was at a 700, and then some things happened and he dropped down to a 500, and now he's in like the mid sixes, and he's more willing to share that story so that borrowers, or so that clients will open up, because we don't care.
Right. It's about what you're doing to move forward, and it's not about focusing on the mistakes that you might have made along the way. You learn from them, and things happen, and we all go through things, and it's nobody's judging you in the real estate world.
Absolutely. We don't care. We've seen it all.
Right. So I think I know what you're going to say to this, but if anybody's scared to be in the market right now, what would you tell them?
Oh gosh. Okay. So if anybody's scared to be in the market, honestly, just don't. Just make sure that you can qualify for it. Mm-hmm. There's literally legal protections in place to make sure that we can't give you so much more lending than you can actually qualify for. We take into consideration your child support. We take into consideration, I mean, we don't technically take into consideration taxes, but like we look at your credit. We look at your credit history. Again, it's game planning too. So like if right now you don't feel like you're ready, well, what about in 3 months? You know, our rates are coming down a little bit, but again, it's time in the market, not timing the market. So like, let's find something you can afford now to make sure that you're also going to be able to afford it later.
Right. So I think the best time to buy is really when you're ready. Now, start planning for it. I kind of chuckle when I read the headlines that say, oh, now's the time to buy, or don't buy now because this is happening, or whatever. It's really the time to buy is as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Like really, you want to get into owning some real estate as soon as you possibly can.
Stop paying attention to the headlines. Also, the headlines are super sensationalized when they say, oh, rates dropped so much overnight, and us mortgage people are like, no, they
really didn't.
That's already, the investors already take a look at that. We dropped like 6 months ago. So yeah, it might be like, oh, the 7% is now a little bit less than the 7,125, but like, dope, we're still in the pretty similar territory.
Right. Well, I think we've kind of covered a lot today, and obviously there's so much more that we can go into with investments. So I'd certainly love to have you back again, but I do want to thank you for being here today. And, You definitely make the financial journey sound fun. You're approachable, and that's really what people overall need. So if you're ready to buy, if you're ready to invest, or if you're ready to just start planning, you can always talk to Madison. She's at Synergy One Lending, and she will definitely set you up. She will be able to have that investment talk with you about why now is the best time, or when your now should be. So obviously you want to remember, if you need anything in real estate, you can contact me, Rebecca Nadelka, and Your Realtor Mom, and I promise I will keep it simple, smooth, and sold.